Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the CNBC Africa special, where we will be unpacking the recently tabled budget of the City of Johannesburg. I am Fifi Peters, and it is great to be with you as always. Now, the City of Johannesburg did recently table its budget for the 2019-2020 financial year. And this year's budget placed strong emphasis on issues such as the supply of affordable water, electricity, adequate housing, health, and public safety. The budget will build on a concept that Johannesburg Executive Mayor Herman Mashaba had introduced at his State of the City address, and the Diphetogo Project, also known as Changes, is intended to promote transformational change. But in the face of increased electricity tariffs, increased tariffs on water, property rates, and refuse removal, will the city be able to meet its obligations? Here to talk to us about this is the City of Johannesburg MMC for Finance, Funzela Ngobeni. I'm also joined by the MMC for Corporate and Shared Services, Dr. Ntombi Khumalo. MMC for Infrastructure and Services, Nico Diaga, is also with us. And we are also in conversation with Landiwe Mahlangu, who's the Chief Economist at Amazwi Advisory. Thank you so much for your time, everybody, and good morning. MMC for Finance, I'm going to start with you, given that you are the man who holds the purse strings of this city. It's a 64.5 billion rand budget. Paint us a picture of exactly how it will be spent and the priority areas.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Fifi, and thank you for having us, and greetings to my panelists. Look, in 2017-2018, as you correctly say, we introduced a concept called Diphetogo. And really what informed this concept was a realization that as a City of Johannesburg, we are running against time. Our people are losing patience. They want service delivery now. And as a city in the past, we have really tried to do a lot with too little. So we took a conscious decision to say we need to really identify areas that we can focus more on. And in Diphetogo, we have identified, for example, public safety as one area that we need to focus on. We have identified infrastructure development and infrastructure maintenance as an issue that we need to really focus on. We have also identified that social development and health are also quite key in that. So you will see in our budget that there's a whole lot of focus towards those areas. But we haven't forgotten that it's important for us to also ensure that there is economic growth in the city, economic growth that is able to create jobs. So we are putting money towards that as well. So this budget really, it's as we theme it, it's advancing Diphetogo from what we adopted in the previous year.
All right, so advancing change. I mean, yes. Crime is a really big issue in terms of attracting tourists, in terms of really getting economic growth and all that going. Talk to us exactly about how the beefing up of the police and the beefing up of security, MMC Ntombi there, if you can come in here, the beefing up of security, talk to me about exactly how you intend to ensure that the allocation of that budget is sufficiently used. As the finance MMC said, you guys have got a lot to do with very little. So how do you intend on doing that?
Yeah, good morning to the listeners, and thank you for having us. I think one of the highlights of the budget in relation to the safety is obviously the recruitment of the extra 1,500 JMPD officers. I think if you look at the demand in terms of the safety, if you look at our crime rates, that was something very important to try and build into the budget, to try and ensure that we have a way of actually combating or dealing with the issues around crime.
But exactly these new guys that you are bringing on board, I mean, how are you selecting them? Exactly where will they be deployed? Bring us into your HR processes there.
So they've actually been deployed,
right.
So they're in the process of being trained. We're looking at them actually completing their training at around September, October. They should be out in the streets, and they'll obviously be deployed as per the need. So the department itself, the Department of Public Safety, will then determine the need and how they place them throughout the city for different reasons, to combat different challenges that we face as a city.
For sure. Now, infrastructure, I mean, infrastructure being the bedrock of economic growth, and perhaps that's why we're not really going anywhere, because the infrastructure allocation has really crumbled. I mean, you see what's happening with our construction companies, and that's got a knock-on effect with everyone else. How much did you get, and what are the plans for beefing things up there?
Thank you, Fifi. Just in short, my portfolio, environment and infrastructure services, control about probably close to 60% or just over 60% of the total budget of the total 64 billion rand, 64.5 billion rand. But also, it is not necessarily that we don't have enough money. We have to start using the money that we get more wisely. In the previous financial year, and I'll use that as an example, we completed a substation, Sebenza substation. We got a lot of attention. When we completed that substation, we realized a spending of 50 million rand on a 1.2 billion rand investment. Now that in itself is massive, and there's a reason why. It is because the entities started using their money wisely. We started, although we use contractors, we procure on behalf of the contractor. In Joburg Water for this current financial year, we've got a benchmark of 80 kilometers of pipe replacement. But by the end of June, we would have replaced 103 kilometers of pipe because of the way that we do things and the fact that we're working against time, especially with water. We have a massive water loss, around 40% of water due to technical, non-technical losses.
I mean, in the news this morning, I'm hearing that there are reservoirs that are running short, and therefore...
Yeah, that is on the rainwater side. We can't... That is also because of this time of year. And let me just maybe put that into context. Rainwater work on a 60-80% ratio. 60%, that's when their alarm go off, and at 80%, that's of course the ultimate, for them that's ideal. As soon as it runs at 59%, they will alert us that they are then below 60%. So that is really the alarm bells that you hear. From the Johannesburg city side, we have no fear. Our reservoirs at this point in time are fully operational and running at full capacity.
Well, as a Joburger, I'm happy to hear that. But let's just get an independent view of this budget. Landiwe, if you can just weigh in here. You've seen them, many budgets in your time. What do you make of the allocation plans of the city?
Yeah, no, thanks, and a good morning to the viewers. Look, clearly, let me just start in general. You know, the cities, and Joburg in particular, are becoming quite very important just on the macroeconomy, purely because the largest concentration of the people are actually staying there. And if anything, if there's going to be any growth in this country, growth would have to occur in the cities. Yeah. So the lens in which one would have to look at the budget, to an extent that it actually fosters economic growth, and also, addresses the mass of people that are there, is a manner in which it is pro-poor. To what extent does the budget actually improve, or for that matter, access to services, to those that are marginalized? That's the most important lens that we should look at it. But also, it was quite interesting to say that, to an extent that you could foster economic growth, it means the cities has to invest in actually infrastructure. So we'd have to look to what extent does the budget of Joburg in particular invest in infrastructure, because it is through the extension of infrastructure that you could have some much more productivity in the economy, and then as such, the economy will grow. That's why they're saying, in any country, if the country has got to grow at 1%, the cities, just like the spokes, must grow at probably a factor of about 3 or 4%.
Yeah, for sure. No, the cities need to drive growth. Yeah. And in terms of a pro-poor budget, I read, and please correct me if I'm wrong there, MMC, in terms of the level of poverty that we are seeing in the city, 45% of Joburgers are living below the poverty line. That's a lot. That's a lot. You mentioned the fact that you guys have been doing quite a lot with very little. And I imagine that in order to do more, you'd want more buy-in from business going forward. What is the thinking on addressing the issue of redress and inequality that you guys are currently facing? Yeah,
no, absolutely. I mean, it's quite key, and I think the point you are raising about the private sector is exactly where our hope is, because as a city, as you know, we are just an enabler to make sure that the private sector investors are able to come and operate in the city. And we have put a lot of plans around attracting investment in the city. our Department of Economic Development has come up with an economic growth strategy that speaks directly to how we intend to attract investment. Because as Landiwe says, as a city, we have made a commitment, which is a bold commitment, to say by 2021 we want this economy to have grown by 5%. We know very well that currently the economy is growing at about 1.5% in the city, even less as a country.
Yeah.
But there is a forecast, a forecast that says if the city doesn't do anything, by 2021 we'll have grown by 2.4%. Now, it means that we need to put interventions for us to be able to get to the 5%. And our growth strategy, economic growth strategy, speaks directly to those interventions. We are coming up with priority areas, economic zones, where we're going to obviously incentivize the private sector to actually go to that area and invest.
Yeah.
Inner city is one of those where we are seeing them coming in big numbers, and the interest, particularly on the inner city regeneration program that we have adopted, where we said, we've got properties that have been hijacked, they're now derelict. We want the private sector to take over those properties for a time being, maybe for 15 to 20 years, develop them and then give them out as affordable accommodation. And the interest has been massive. That's one of the areas that we're looking at. But like I said, we've got economic nodes across the city. In Randburg, we want to develop Randburg, Rodiport. Those are areas that has a lot of potential, and we have not actually tapped on that potential. So as a city, we are looking at that. But over and above, this is going to assist us in talking to the issue that we have raised of being pro-poor. Because a lot of our people are staying in far-flung areas. You find our residents staying in the Ivory Park in the north, Orange Farm in the south, and the traveling expenses to economic opportunities is quite huge.
And if you just allow me to jump in there, I think that this is part of what the previous administration, won't spend too much time on them, had done in trying to change the makeup of the city of Johannesburg, from being one that is, entrenched in the legacy of apartheid spatial planning, into one in which there's more connectivity and inclusivity for people who have been on the margins.
Absolutely. I mean, and we are taking from that. We actually voted earlier on in our term what we call inclusionary housing policy, whereby we are actually saying to developers, wherever you develop, make sure that you accommodate 30% of affordable housing. That policy has been adopted by council, a multi-party council, and it's one of the things that will help us to address the spatial inequality that we have in the city. So we are taking from that spatial development framework that from the previous administration, we are moving and accelerating in regards to that. And the inner city and other economic nodes are part of that development framework.
I mean, Nico, just on that issue of infrastructure, I'm quite interested in the kind of projects. Maybe perhaps you can speak to us. I mean, I know you did mention something around water, which is very important, but anything in the regard of energy, and especially if we look at the rate at which electricity costs are increasing at a pace that is, I wish my salary was growing at 15% a year, but it's way too much. So. What can you tell us about that, or perhaps to which degree you're concerned that the electricity tariffs that you guys are constantly having to implement could be an impediment to some of your infrastructure plans?
It is absolutely so, because remember also, Fifi, what is important that we are trying to bring more people onto the grid. So in the current financial year, we had bargained, or we tried to bring 5 informal settlements onto the grid. And I'm happy to say that because of interventions and savings, we will bring 8 informal settlements onto the grid. But those generally are people that cannot afford to pay. Okay. So we, as ratepayers, those that can afford, must cross-subsidize. That's just the reality. That is what pro-poor is about. So now what we now have to further look at is at the microgrid solution. For us to take microgrids to new developments, informal settlements, any new development, take a microgrid that can then on-sell into the grid. Okay. And that is something that we have written to the minister back in March. Minister Pravin Gordhan was still the Minister of Public Enterprises. And we wrote a letter from the Mayor's office to the Minister requesting for Johannesburg to have the right to generate up to 800 megawatts, which is roughly 40% of the need of Johannesburg. Currently, we are being hamstrung. We're not allowed to generate our own electricity other than the little bit that we are generating from Kelvin. But we need to do more as a city to be able to generate our own electricity that can then benefit our residents, and especially in times of load shedding.
Yeah, I mean, you raised the issue of the politics, and of course one can't ignore the fact that the City of Joburg is being controlled by one administration, and at national level you've got something else. You say that previously you weren't allowed to do certain things. I'm just wondering how confident we all are at the table as to, now that we're in a new administration, a new dawn, we could have better synergies, better collaboration as a result?
I think that the minister opened the door himself when he, maybe accidentally so, said that we must allow municipalities to generate for themselves.
Yeah.
So possibly open the Pandora's box, which all of us are waiting for. In fact, cities are all waiting for an outcome on a Cape Town case, where Cape Town's taken the Department of Energy to court in an attempt for them to go out on PPPs and rather IPPs and generate its own electricity.
Yeah.
And I think with the new dawn, and we need to take advantage of the new dawn, and that's exactly what we're going to do. I mean, if you look at, for example, the issues in Alexandra, Fifi, the issues at Alexandra have been going on for many years. And you'll have seen what happened before elections with the protest, and then the president went there, and obviously after that he has invited us as a City of Johannesburg to come around the table with all spheres of government, the province and national government, to find a solution for people of Alexandra. Because in the main, the issues in Alexandra are national competency, are provincial competency. It's your issue of housing, it's the issue of land. And I'm glad that he took that step, and it shows that there is a commitment of working with the cities. And I think Lwandile mentioned it earlier on that the cities are now the drivers of economy. If we are going to exclude them, you're really not going to see economic growth that we all want. We need to see going forward, and those are some of the things we're going to advocate for, that a lot of things need to be devolved to cities.
Like what?
For example, what the MMC was talking about. We need to see cities being the one that generating and being able the one that, but over and above that, I mean, if you look at the issue of housing, we receive a grant from national government, and that grant comes with conditions. You have to use it for certain things, but you can't use it for other things. Now, we are trying to do something in the inner city. We're trying to make sure that the poor of the poor access economic opportunities. But we can't build RDP houses in the inner city. Those buildings that we are taking over, we can't turn them into RDP houses because the grant that we get from national doesn't allow us to do that. It says you must go and build structures somewhere. You can use it for example, redeveloping a building that has been derelict and turning it into an RDP. So those are things that we'll be advocating for, and we hope that with the new dawn, some of these ideas that will be coming out of cities will be taken on board, and we can see our country moving forward.
Okay. The issue of inward migration, though, and this is from everywhere in the country, also from everywhere in the continent, certainly putting a lot more pressure on this budget and on the city's ability to deliver on services. If you've got more people than you're expected, and particularly, I mean, on the safety and security element, I imagine that the issue of inward migration, more people flocking to the city, is a bit of a concern.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. I think we're seeing high numbers of people coming into the city on a monthly basis, obviously not matching what we've budgeted for in terms of what water we offer, electricity, healthcare. So we're having a huge demand and pressure on basic services such as healthcare, water, electricity, and all of that. We are trying in the city to ensure that we develop and create capacity that we can, that can match that. But I think that is something that we need to be cognizant of, a challenge that we need to be aware of, that the city does face, especially the city of Johannesburg.
Yeah. I mean, Landi, for you, inward migration, to what degree could you see it being an impediment, a challenge for the city of Joburg, in fact cities as a whole, but particularly those that are close to economic nodes like ours, of really moving forward?
Yeah, look, this is a phenomenon that I think probably most of the cities do experience. Clearly, because of economic opportunities and perceived job opportunities that are in the city, you'd always have a number of people coming there. Even though statistically the chance of them getting a job are quite slim, but people, they still have a perception that they will always find something in the city. So what you normally do, you find that cities becomes urban of all manner of people that are coming in.
Right.
And because of the limited economic opportunities, you have what we normally call poverty, or urbanization of actually poverty, where you find that the largest concentration of people that are poor, as you've already alluded to, are actually in the cities. My view is that I think the issue of amenities and actual housing would always be one of the issues that has been prioritized, and I think it would be quite interesting to see to what extent the initiative of inner city housing begins to actually address that point. But but there's also a trade-off. You see, one of the difficulties that you actually find is that, much as we need compact cities, in other words, cities where there's actually, density such that, the services are actually ensuring that, are provided, efficiently. But because there's over-reliance, or in fact, even in this budget to some extent, on property rates, they tend to promote what we call sprawl. In other words, is, you actually, unwittingly actually promote, the sprawl. In other words, actually, negating the compactness of the city, because more reliance is actually on the property rates. So the short answer is that we must find a combination of actually inner city development, but as well as actually looking at the settlement that we do towards more density.
Yeah.
And then in that way, probably, to some extent, you'd be able to address both the in-migration, but also the actual organic growth of the people that are actually staying in the city as well.
I mean, you talk about inner city development. It's so sad now. We're reading headlines that Maboneng is kind of, it's crumbling. It's not the shining glory that it used to be. And I'm just wondering now. I think the conversation is also about moving forward or moving deeper into creating smart cities. And I'm just wondering, as we harness and leverage what technology can do and create smart cities, such that there's not so much of inward migration, and that people can access opportunities closer to their homes. What's the thinking around that? Maboneng and making for smarter cities, Nico?
Yeah, it is. The ideal city would grow up and not sprawl. That is just the reality of it, and that is what my colleague is saying, and Mr. Nubeni is saying, that it is so important for us to make this inner city regeneration initiative work. That means our infrastructure, it won't have to travel so fast. Water will be closer to where it's originally coming from, and we don't have the reticulation network is a lot smaller, etc. It's just basic things that make sense. So we need to find a way to make that work, and for the other spheres of government to see what we are trying to do and why that option is viable. We have to understand that electricity is an economic enabler. Children will not have to study by candlelight. People will not have to rely on paraffin to cook if they have electricity. That is what we're trying to do with the electrification projects. Bulk of our CapEx project in City Power is going towards the refurbishment of a network that is ailing and failing us. Remember, we have spoken at length about the fact that our economic or our electricity network is standing currently a backlog of about 18 billion rand. We're still only on about 1.1 billion in refurbishment of the network, including a level of new people coming on board from the informal settlements that we're electrifying. So in actual fact, we're really only looking at about 900 million on the refurbishment. But from our side, from the city power side, then we have to do more to make the entity more viable. We have to find our missing customers. We have to work closer with finance, and we have our regular meetings and fighting, etc. about that. But we have to do more to find missing customers, to find the missing money. We just found 441 million rand from one of our accounts, where Eskom has overcharged us over 3 years by 441 million rand on 1 of 5 accounts. Now that is massive.
And then you hopeful you'll get that money back?
They've already acknowledged. I've sent the MMC the letter. They've acknowledged, and it's as simple as us withholding payment. But they've agreed to it, so we won't go down that route.
Okay, okay. Good luck. But you know, can I just move, because I want us to unpack all the different spheres here. The latest on transport. I mean, this also being part of accelerating development. The Ria Vaya bus services. What can you tell us about their allocation and the deployment there, and even the Gautrain? I remember at the President's investment drive last year, there was an oversubscribed expression of interest in partaking in the extension project for the Gautrain. What can you tell us about transport?
Yeah, no, and I think transport is quite linked to what we were discussing just now about people living in the inner city rather than on the sprawl, because this is part of really developing your mixed corridors, housing development. And it's not only inner city where we're looking at. As I said, we're looking at Randburg, we're looking at corridors like on the Orange Grove, we're looking at Auckland Park. Those are corridors that are connected by this Ria Vaya. And we are putting money to it. Ria Vaya this year, I mean, we allocated 4.7 billion on a 3-year medium term as a capex, but we are giving them 1.4 billion as operating budget. And really for them is to develop and maintain the network that they currently have. We are in the process of finalizing phase 1C of Ria Vaya, which will connect Alexander and to Sentin and other areas. And with that money, they'll be able to buy new buses. They'll be able to develop that particular phase and complete it, and including the one that's that's still stalling on the Orange Grove on the Louis Botha Avenue. We want to finalize that, and we believe that the money that we have given to them will be able to assist. But over and above Ria Vaya, we also have Metrobus, which also, needs to be taken care of. We have given them enough budget as well.
So we are likely going to see, a lot of those old buses that we're seeing on our road away?
We're going to see them going away, but we're also going to bring, as we were talking about smart city, also going to bring a little bit of technology in them. We want to integrate the ticketing system of Ria Vaya and Metrobus, so that if you have a ticket for Ria Vaya, you can also use it for Metrobus. If we've got the one for Metrobus, you can use it for Ria Vaya. We're doing that. We're also giving them a new ticketing, bus ticketing system. Paying a cashless system where we don't have to pay cash when you get into the bus. We have seen that process have made us lose a lot of money. Because people, can do as they wish and take the money and pocket them, the drivers and so forth. But by bringing in this technology, it will assist us. We're going to put CCTV cameras in the buses for security reasons, and really, it's we believe that the allocation that they've received will go a long way in making sure that transport, as an enabler as well, it's able to address some of the challenges that we have.
Landiwe, perhaps if I pick up with you, the city has made some budget allocations towards addressing healthcare and towards addressing education. What do you make of them?
Well, I think the issue of healthcare, it's an issue that is probably very important, just in terms of the quality of life, of the people. But what I think it's would be quite interesting to me would be to to see to what extent are these cities' efforts actually aligned to the national government policy, because
right.
It's quite important that as the city invests in the services and allocate in the services, there's an alignment with they must locate it within an acceptable national policy, such that there should be, if you like, much more impact. So for me, it's a very good gesture, and I know that the city, for instance, is involved in a mobile clinic, something that I think probably has not been really there. I mean, I've not seen more mobile clinic for some time, but I think these are some of the efforts that probably maybe talks to the to maybe the pro-poorness of the budget.
Yeah.
But for me, one needs to actually see how does one locate this, within the current debate in terms of the national health provision generally. So I think those are some of the issues that I would like to hear much more from the city.
Let's I mean, in terms of that alignment, MMC Ngubeni yesterday, that shocking report that 500,000 South Africans adults are living with HIV. Yeah. You've got a situation with education whereby getting your child into a school, into a good school, is often a problem. We hear of it every year. That alignment that Alandiwe is talking about, how close are we, and especially under this new dawn?
Yeah, I mean, correctly so. We have to align all our policies with the province, with national government, and that's exactly what. Remember, even health as a competency is a competency of province, and we are delegated this responsibility as a city, and we are doing the best that we can to really live up to that. But innovative ways like the one that we are introducing of mobile clinics, I mean, comes as a result of the engagement that we have had with our residents and the need that we can see out there. With all informal settlements that are cropping across the city, we don't have facilities in those areas. So how do we then find a way of reaching our residents and making sure that they remain healthy and at least they get the treatment that they deserve? We thought that mobile clinics should be one of them. We know that it's not going to resolve all the issues, but for a time being, we are able to reach all the regions in the city, because we're going to get about 10 of them, which we're going to deploy across the city and in all the 7 regions of the city. And we think that it will make a huge difference. But MMC Kumalo will talk even about the clinics that we have that we are building.
Yeah.
We are building quite a number of clinics. We have also engaged ourselves in a program of extended hours on clinics, precisely from the need
for the workers.
For opening times
Right.
for clinics now. Normally you will go to a city clinic on a Saturday afternoon, it will be closed. You'll go to a city clinic on a Sunday, there won't be anyone there,
But I think also the issue there is the shortage of skills, and that's why I was asking for the workers. So, MMC Kumalo, I mean, talk to me about the building of more clinics and also skilling them, the insourcing, quite a contentious issue of late, in fact, for a while. How are you guys approaching that?
Thanks. So we definitely realize the need around increasing, as you say, the challenges that the country faces in relation to HIV, etc. So we actually have had, one of the highlights in the budget has been the increased allocation of building new and reconstructing and renovating some of the clinics that we have. MMC mentions also the operating hours. I think it's very important. Healthcare is actually an essential service. Yeah. And we need people to actually access it. So we're taking it to the areas where traditionally, originally, people didn't have access, in informal settlements in the form of, the mobile clinics. But something else that is also a social ill that is being addressed in the budget that is quite important is the rehabilitation centers for drug abusers. So those are free, historic, something that has never happened in the city, and that, the budget allocation is one way that the city is recognizing that this is an issue, a social ill that needs to be addressed and that can affect health and impact and increase the healthcare service demand as well. So we're addressing that. I think the other thing as well in terms of operating hours of clinics, so we've extended operating hours for clinics. Precisely again, we've got working individuals in the city, we've got working residents that we also need to cater to. And I mean, like the mayor always says, like myself, but the mayor likes to always say, you know, people don't decide, I'm going to get sick between 8 and 4 today, and then I'm going to be fine afterwards. So we've extended the hours to ensure that people that knock off from work are still able to go sort their headache out, still get their chronic medication, etc., etc. And yes, you talk about the issue of capacity. So something that we're doing as group corporate and shared services in the city, along in partnership with the Department of Health and Social Development in the city, is that we're working very closely to ensure that we're capacitating these clinics. You can't build a clinic if you've got no workers working there. So there's also been a lot of provision in terms of HR to enable us to recruit. So we call that in the budget strategic appointments. So those would be some of what composes those strategic appointments where we've built a new clinic. We need more staff, and we're equipping you know, that particular establishment with the capacity that it needs. I think another thing in terms of you know, addressing some of the social challenges that the city has is the extended service package. So this is ESP, we normally call it. This is a service offered to people who actually cannot afford in the city. So you're able to apply and get your water and electricity, provision for water and electricity, because you have nothing to provide for yourself. So those are some of the things around health and social development that you know, are actual highlights in us actually addressing and bringing about real change to the residents of the city of Joburg.
All right, and then another thing that affects people's health, obviously, is the amount of pollution that you're staying with. Refuse collection often being a problem. The strikes that we see at Pick It Up, and it really not having the best of effects, especially when you look at areas like Alexandra, even that you know are infested with all sorts of rats and diseases as a result of you know, this refuse collection not always going right. What can you tell us about where things stand with Pick It Up?
Fifi, I really just need to explain one thing. Pick It Up has not had a strike in more than 2.5 years.
Has it been that long?
2.5 years since Pick It Up had a strike. The reality is, we had a work stoppage last year that lasted for, in September last year, that lasted for about 5-10 days. That was not Pick It Up.
Yeah.
Those were residents blocking entrances to the depot and did not want to allow our environmentalists to leave the depots. So it wasn't a Pick It Up strike.
Okay.
And then we had the issue with fleet towards the end of last year. But you know, for the rest, service delivery protest impacts on the ability for Pick It Up to perform their duty. At the moment, we have an issue last week we had an issue in Yeovil. Again, our workers were forced at gunpoint to dump rubbish from trucks in the middle of the road. Now, that's not a Pick It Up doing it. That is the behavior of unruly people.
But ultimately, Pick It Up being impacted.
Pick It Up being impacted. And it looks as if Pick It Up is not doing their job, but I can assure you we have very, very committed. And we have sometimes open door policy between the mayor's office, the mayor himself, and workers at Pick It Up. We have a phenomenal relationship. And I promise you, the moment something goes wrong, the mayor calls and say, I need you in my office, I need Pick It Up. You need to address this. So we have a very good relationship just in that. We do have also added responsibility of the waste pickers, the informal sector. The informal sector, and those are the guys going around the trolleys collecting waste. There is no formal agreement between the city and the informal sector, but we are recognizing the critical role that they are playing.
Right. Those are the guys we see at like 5-6 o'clock in the morning, pulling those in on the road.
More like 5 o'clock in the morning. Yes, when I go to work, that's when I see them. I just want to put it out there.
You start at 5. Wow, you work hard for your money.
I just want the leader of executive business to know.
Hint, hint.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Or I'm on my way somewhere if it's not to work. Right. But nevertheless. We do have to strengthen the role, and we have to recognize the critical role that they are playing. As a result, we had a meeting this morning with Pick It Up where I again plead for the past 2 years, find a way for the recyclers to do their business closer to a garden site, for a mobile buyback center to come to the garden site to collect from recyclables from the informal sector. We cannot have people travel so far. As a result of what the informal sector are doing, together with what the city's initiative of separation at source, just from diverting target against what we're actually sending to the landfill site, we've reduced that by 30%. In the current financial year, which is enormous. That is actually a great win. The reporting from the entity, from Pick It Up itself, is not that good, and that is mainly because of a break in the relationship between the different buybacks, and so we need to strengthen that. That is very critical. And I mentioned that specifically because it impacts on our climate change objectives. There are a number of initiatives in the city, and we widely recognize across the world for the great stuff that we are doing. When we talk
because I mean, is it a year or so ago where we had those very heavy floods in the city of Joburg? I don't know if Kuruleni towards the airport, I don't know if that would fall under you, but ultimately people were affected.
Absolutely. People get affected because of illegal dumping. Our dumping of building rubble, etc. People dump illegally because we close landfill sites, but we never opened additional ones, specifically around building rubble. We now have to find ways. We have to reopen landfill sites just for building rubble. But it is a process. We have to actually apply with national or with provincial government through GDOT, etc. I've already engaged with the Premier when we had the Alexandra Interministerial Task Team. I had the opportunity to engage with the Premier, and he completely supported the idea of what we're trying to do. And that is that strengthening of that relationship.
MMC, Ngobeni, can I ask, this 64.5 billion, I mean, I'd love to have it in my bank account. It's a whole lot for me. But for you and the ambitions of the city to deliver on its objectives, is it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. The budget is approved. Departments are getting.
Is it enough?
It's not enough. It can never be enough. But we believe that with the little that we have, we need to make sure that it achieves what we want to achieve.
But you can leverage from the private sector. And Landiwe, I was wondering, just in your view, in terms of getting more private sector buy-in to support some of your plans, what would they need to do? I know you did mention the issue of incentives, but we have had incentives for a very long time in this country, and business confidence is still low against the backdrop of dwindling economic growth. The city, as you did mention, their growth is a lot higher than that of the sovereign, but to get more private sector buy-in here, what should the city be thinking about?
I think there's a role for a private sector, definitely. What I must say, it's not so clear to me, and that's not very obvious, I mean, even in the budget, is I'm not seeing a very coherent strategy to actually involve, the private sector. For instance, the MMC speaks about, refuse removal. We know that the city of Joburg is running out very fast out of the airspace for actually much more landfill. So these are, I believe, are kind of opportunities and the technology on which, for instance, the private sector could supply just to ensure that we reduce the amount of waste, for instance, that we send to the landfill, because this is part of the the National Development Plan. That basically, in time, we should ensure that we reduce part of the waste that we do to landfill. So one would see probably a much more, if you like, much more aggressive, if you like, effort on the part of the city to actually mobilize private sector on those, on those areas. Similarly, I would, I would say that even on the issue around, around transport in general, it would be quite useful to see to what extent, for instance, are the options being explored for efficiency. We know that the BRT, for instance, much as it's very useful as a transport, but it's actually, as it is now, not very efficient. bus rapid transport system works when there's huge density. At this stage, I think you don't have sufficient densities to actually justify that kind of investment. One would like to see in the cities beginning to actually engage on those discussions, how we should actually work these iconic projects to work better.
Gentlemen, would you like to respond to that? Begin with you,
No, absolutely. I mean, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done on that front with regards to really getting the private sector involved. But like I indicated earlier on, our economic growth strategy, I'll share it with you. It speaks a lot on this matter. So how are we going to attract investment into the city? We talk about the business-friendly city. There's a lot of bylaws that are restrictive that we are dealing with removing so that we can create your red carpet, as it were.
To match your tie.
Exactly. we are establishing a trade council. We are establishing an investment desk. And this is really to have this regular engagement with the private sector to understand their challenges and so forth. We are working.
So when will those come on stream?
They will come in stream now in the new financial year.
Okay.
Yes. We are working very closely with the World Bank with regards to making what's called the ease of doing business in the city. And we are making strides. I mean, look, if I look at the previous level of the ease of doing business, where we were because they're using Johannesburg as a case study for South Africa, and we see that we are going up in terms of the work that we do. So we want to really get to the level where businesses, when they come to the city, feels that it's quite easy to start a business and to be able to get your plans and all your approvals documented process without any issues. So those are things that we are doing, and we think that if we work closely with the private sector, we'll be able to understand where they are, what is it that we need to do more, and so forth. Yeah. And
for you, how in your portfolio are you planning to get more private sector buy-in?
Then spoke about the role of business, private business in a landfill space. That is something that is very much, again, I had a very early morning meeting with Pick It Up and the Department of Environment and Infrastructure Services, where we actually discussed the very issue of landfill sites and what we can do and how we are going to implement the programs that we spoke of. So for me to now discuss it right now would probably be a little bit out of tune, because those are tender
embargo for now.
those are tender procedures that needs to go through, but we are in the process of finalizing PPPs.
All right.
Yeah, and that's also something that we are doing with future wastewater treatment works towards the area around Lanseria. Will also be a public-private partnership. It's
okay, so it is there. There is some action taking place.
But we need to do more, and especially around waste. The creation of MRFs on our landfill sites, where we can have refuge removal privatized at that level.
Oh no, we're watching you closely as residents, but MMC Commander, you were talking to me briefly about the innovations that, particularly around service delivery, if we stick to this theme. Tell our viewers a little bit more.
Yeah, thank you. So I think I mentioned some of the issues related to healthcare, for example. But something that we actually recognized and acknowledged is that we do have a challenge around service delivery. So we've actually increased our foot soldiers on the ground towards ensuring that there's more intense monitoring of our service delivery issues, where there are backlog, long-standing issues that have been logged that aren't addressed. So we've actually created a unit that is actually going to be specifically dealing with those sort of service delivery issues. Okay,
because I see even in this financial year, you guys have moved quite strongly by way of sorting out the billing-related issues.
Yes, yes. So I think definitely the city is making strides towards the billing challenges that we have. Used to be called a crisis. We are not there yet. Yeah. We're not there anymore, rather. So we've done great strides towards ensuring that we're moving to a point where we are, we've dealt with a lot of the queries. A lot of the queries have been dealt with. MMC Finance probably can speak a little bit better on that particular issue, but there's really been huge strides made towards the billing challenges that we've been facing in the past few years in the city.
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
If I just on the billing issue, City Power about 18 months ago initiated a project called Buya Mteto, which is exactly to deal with issues, to find our missing customers. We recognize that there's a large chunk of customers not on the network, and especially from developers of complexes. In Midrand last night, I had a public meeting in Midrand where residents are complaining bitterly about the fact that there are still complexes not on the grid, not paying for services.
Yeah.
Now that is illegal connections by people that can afford to pay. That is just absolute theft. Buya Mteto, let me tell you residents, Buya Mteto is coming for you.
Bring back the law. And I remember, continue.
Thanks. I think just mentioning some of the highlights in relation to service delivery. I think you mentioned earlier on the challenges around crime. I spoke about the rehabilitation centers that are now available. They've never been in existence in the city of Johannesburg that we now have offering to our residents. The other thing that we do have also that's pretty historic and a highlight is the Narcotics Unit. Johannesburg has never had that unit. We've made provision for it. We have it in place now. That's also addressing the issue around crime and drugs
particularly amongst the youth, I imagine.
Particularly amongst young people. So that's some of the things. I think we also look at library hours. Students go to school during the day. Libraries open during the day. So how are you catering and actually offering that service to students? We've again increased the operating hours of libraries throughout the city. Not all of them yet, but we are working and allocating budget towards ensuring that ultimately libraries are actually catering and are there meeting the needs of those who use it most.
Yeah, and when they need it.
And when they need it, absolutely.
I mean, in the interest of time, time flies when you're having great conversations, maybe important conversations about the economy. Just as in closing comments, your 2019-2020 budget, going forward, perhaps, I don't know, you want to raise anything that you're excited about, or perhaps any concerns that you may have by way of implementation. Landiwe, can we kick off with you?
Well, Claire, maybe one should start with the positive side. I must say the issue of the fact that the city has now getting their hands around billing is quite very refreshing, because that's one of the things that Joburg has been known for. Yeah. I mean, yes, listen. But I think also on the overall, one must not also underplay the kind of constraint that is actually, operating. I mean, if you look at, except for refuse removal, all other services and actually charges are far below, are far above inflation. Electricity, you're paying 18 cents more in a rent than you used to do before. So, and water as well. So I think in time is that that would probably be, if you like, put much more pressure on the residents. And I know that I think even the MMC was very strenuously making the point that they tried to absorb this, but water and electricity happens to be one of the key services, and which actually have seen a very dramatic, increase. So I think with that in mind, and I know that some of it's not within their control. It is one of those things that they'll have to navigate, because it is real increase in actually input costs. It is actually real on the businesses. It is actually a real cost in terms of the poor.
It's a problem for everyone.
I think for me the most important part of this budget is to do in City Power, Joburg Water, pick it up, to do exactly what we did in the previous financial year. To not sit on the money, but to spend the money. Because it's one thing to allocate the money. We get the money, but are we spending it? And I'm really happy, MMC, that come the end of this current financial year, Water and Power would have spent by over 100% of their budget. That again, we did the same thing last year. In fact, we then took over some of the housing allocation to spend their money in the last month as well. That's absolutely critical. Where we get the money, not to only spend it wisely, but to spend it.
Yeah, put it to good work.
Put it to work.
Thanks. So I think the highlight for me, amongst all the other things that we've spoken about, must be the insourcing of security guards and cleaners in the city, offering those workers in those sectors dignity, dignified salary, access to benefits where they have opportunities to develop themselves as permanent employees, where they can study, they can get a bond, they can do stuff for themselves. So that ability for the city to have embarked on this process and carrying it forward to cleaners. So we've done security guards, we're moving on to cleaners now. It's such a great joy and to do that and impact people's lives in that way. So I share that passion along with the mayor of the City of Johannesburg, Councillor Herman Mashaba, in ensuring that we offer people dignity and people are not exploited.
Yeah. Certainly.
Yeah, look, for me it really is to say, for the past 3 years that we've been in this administration, we've grappled with so many challenges, Fifi, and those that we didn't really expect. But I think what is key is that we must not shy away from facing them. We must not shy away of communicating with our residents on these challenges. And there's a lot. And I believe that the city has immense potential. I think there's a lot of opportunities that we need to tap on. We need to be creative, innovative. We must be able to live up to the smart city tag that we want to eventually be referred to. And I think this budget, will accelerate this Diphetogo that we have put forward. There's a lot that we are doing. We have not touched on the issue of housing, for example. We're doing a lot. We have put a lot of budget around housing because we want to make sure that the poorest of the poor are catered for with regards to service stands, with regards to upgrading informal settlements. MC Diago spoke about electrification of informal settlements. So there's a lot that needs to be done. This is a big ship, the City of Johannesburg, as Landile said. It's not easy to turn it, but we are committed. And with the leadership of the executive mayor and the team that is around him that you see here, we believe that we'll be able to achieve our goal.
Certainly. MMC, thanks there for your time. On the issue of housing in this recent budget by the City of Johannesburg, 3.5 billion rand allocated to the housing department to attempt to address the housing backlog of some 300,000. Big task, and as we have heard, the city is working with very limited resources to do a lot, but ambitions are high, and it's a wait and see as Joburg residents to see more of what we have seen in the past 3 years, certainly of the city getting its act in order, but of the city doing a lot more to address the inequalities, particularly by the way of poverty, where 45% of people in Johannesburg live below that poverty line. From myself, Fifi Peters, I would first of all like to thank our guests for taking part in today's discussion. That is the City of Johannesburg, MMC for Finance, Funzile Ngobeni, MMC for Corporate and Shared Services, Dr. Ntombi Khumalo, MMC for Environment and Infrastructure Services, Nico Diaga, and of course Landiwe Mahlangu, Chief Economist at Amazwe Advisory. From us here in our Johannesburg studio, it is bye for now.